Hello everyone, it's me, John Lorden, and I'm back with another edition of BrainScratch. And this one is a little bit different. It's going to be kind of a follow-up to my Elisa Lam and the Cecil Hotel video. As you can see, this is my list of top videos, and my first episode of BrainScratch about Elisa Lam and the Cecil Hotel, #1. So first of all, thank you to everyone that has watched that video, and also 30 upvotes and no downvotes, which I really appreciate. I tried to stay fair and kind of impartial about all these weird different ideas that I was kicking out. And also 26 comments. There has been a lot of back and forth, good constructive criticism and talk, and even new pieces of evidence that have been sent my way. So I wanted to kick on the camera again and kind of pick up this story where we left off. Thank a couple of commenters that gave some very good pieces of new information to me, and also maybe open up some new questions about what is going on here. Obviously, this story is still viral years after this occurrence has happened. I mean, I understand the elevator footage in itself is probably enough to keep this story talked about, but I'm surprised at how interested people are to still seek the truth, and I think that is what we all feel is missing from this, and we're going to dive into that a bit more right now. So, first of all, just want to send a couple of thank yous. David Jenkins, thank you for a nice little exchange, and David at first was starting to feel like the hoax theory might be correct, that maybe this was drummed up as some type of PR stunt or business maneuver for the Cecil Hotel. Then he found a piece of newsreel that he sent my way that actually includes some new pictures I have not seen of Elisa with her family. And not only that,
so she's just on a trip. It's in California. After Los Angeles, she was going to go up north. And so basically that's what we have right now on this.
Elisa Lam's parents.
Her parents and her sister are actually in the shot. Now, what's curious about this is before they found the body. This was taken, I believe, on February 6th. And if you want to see this for yourself, just go to the first edition of BrainScratch, go down to the comments, and look for my conversation with David Jenkins. Click on that link, and it'll bring you to ctvnews.ca. But what's curious is they didn't want to comment. So, and I actually did a little more searching, trying to find if they have formally released any type of comment, or if I could find just a video clip of them talking about it or anything. And I can't. Now, what has happened is they are apparently suing the Cecil Hotel. And of course, once you get into litigation like that, your lawyers pretty much tell you to shut up and, don't speak publicly. So it's weird because if you go to the hoax theory, theoretically, could you have hired a couple actors to stand behind LAPD and not say anything and look sad? Yeah, you could. Could you get them to take photos with this other girl that has now been murdered? It starts falling apart there. Could you doctor some photos? Possibly. But my gut is really leaning towards there's a legitimate murder. I believe it was this girl. I believe that it was Elisa Lam. I'm still struck by the social media. Check out BrainScratch episode 1 if you want to see more about that, because the social media feels very weird to me. It feels in some places fictional, but maybe that's just a sign of where she was emotionally and, trying to not be totally honest with the internet. Maybe she got a little fictional with herself. I don't know. But this kind of puts, this was before the body was found, so this puts a little bit more believability definitely on my lap about this being a real girl. This is a real family that was affected by this. And I didn't do too much more research on the lawsuit. I'm not sure how that's progressing. I don't think those lawsuits move very quickly. But I'm hoping to see some news coverage, hopefully it's horrible to say this, but I know once the movie comes out, that's going to raise awareness around this case again, and hopefully we'll see a rash of new media about this. But once again, thanks to David for sending that my way. Quick shout out, Anna Mona, thank you for confirming that Tumblr does indeed have a way that you could write a post and then have it be published in the future. Now, I don't know if that's really what's going on with Elisa's blogs. Some of the other things that I've read allude to maybe her account has been hacked. There's also a very big question, but I'm going to leave it for a little bit later. So just wanted to do a quick shout out for Anna Mona. Thank you for that information. Captain Pizza, thank you for the thumbs up. Bread and Circus 1, thank you for the thumbs up. And big thank you to Brain Gravity. Brain Gravity actually threw some good questions my way and then came back with some great information, including a link to Elisa's autopsy report, which I actually went through page by page. And, you know, it's a bit dark. It's kind of, you know, it's not the funnest read I've ever done in my life, but I felt like it was fair to go through it to really see what truths could be sussed from that. And let's take a quick look. First of all, here is the actual PDF. If you want to see it for yourself, just head to the comments section on that first episode of BrainScratch. What's really curious here is this. You can see that they initially marked her death as could not be determined, and then actually scratched it out and labeled it as an accident. And this happened, it seems like a day before this was released to the public. However, that was still, I think, about 3 months after the actual autopsy happened. And this was done, I believe these X-outs were done by, I can't tell by the signature there. There was one person, I believe it was Tovar, that actually performed the autopsy with Dr. Wang. Yulai Wang. So what's interesting is you can see that they did do some testing where they could. Apparently there wasn't enough blood samples to be very conclusive, but they did get some results back, and from their testing they found hints of her prescription medications, nothing that looked like an overdose. I think in her heart blood they actually did note a very minute trace of alcohol, but not enough to say that she, you know, had gone binge drinking or anything like that. What's really good about this report is they actually talk about her medications, and one of the things that Brain Gravity was talking to me about was, what if she mistook her meds, you know, maybe doubled up on one or was abusing them in some way. They actually have the counts here, and you can see not only the counts, but when she was last given her prescription. And I did a pretty good check on those, and what's interesting is a couple of the counts are actually over, like, you know, she's supposed to get 60 pills, and her case actually had 65 pills. Well, some of those medications are used on an as-needed basis, and sometimes you have some left over from the previous month, and you just pop them in the new container. I know that from personal experience with medication I take. None of the pill bottles were depleted in a way that looked abusive, and according to the preliminary tox screens, there was no levels that were found that would suggest that. However, clearly noted on this document is a further toxicology report, and I still cannot find any information about that. I find news stories referring to the fact that this document was released and there's supposed to be a further tox report, and I cannot find that information. So anyone out there, if you stumble upon that, please drop a comment, give me a link so we can review that and keep this investigation that we're all doing together going. And just thank you for the information you did send, once again, to Brain Gravity. Thank you, Ashley Johnson. Yeah, my brain keeps turning on this story as well. WZ Tudor never likes to go to LA if they can help it. I gotta say, I've lived around the Los Angeles area my whole life. There are places you can go in LA and it's relatively safe, and there's places like the Cecil Hotel and Skid Row that you shouldn't go. As a matter of fact, The Skid Row, we just had a shooting where a homeless man was shot by LAPD like 5 times when he apparently reached for their gun. It's not a place where you would like to vacation, so let's just put that out there. If anyone's coming to LA, don't stay around Skid Row. Find out where that is and don't stay there, okay? You know, staying around Hollywood, staying in Universal City, staying in kind of the suburbs of downtown LA proper. Even downtown LA is actually very upscale and nice now compared to what it used to be. But there are still sections that you don't want to go in. I was watching a video last night, we'll also talk a little bit more about later, and they had a map of murders that happened in the LA area, and they were pointing to the South Central area and saying this will be completely covered with murder dots within a few months. So just watch out. There's a couple places. LA is huge, but there's a few places you don't want to go. Thank you, Paul Woodruff, for the thumbs up on the video and comment. Thank you, John Smith. Thank you, Robert Montez. So, someone else, Brain Gravity, once again, also sent me a video that is, I believe it's in Chinese, but shows that there actually is a way to get to the roof without triggering any alarms that's fairly easy, and that is using the fire escape. So it's not impossible that she got up there. It didn't have to be an employee that let her up there. She could have gotten to the fire escape and climbed up there. It still raises some questions about how she got on top of the water tank, because the water tanks, it's not like they have a ladder system built onto them. Even the maintenance workers need to take ladders out there when they're getting up to the top of the water tank. And there's a few other questions we're going to dive into. But once again, thanks Brain Gravity. This video you can also find in the comments section. I took a look at Snopes, who has an official article on this, because people mentioned, is this some type of YouTube prank, and Snopes has picked it up, and they say, no, it's not. Pretty much they're echoing everything that the police have stated. And one of the things that they ask is, another matter of interest to the public, thank you, is how Lam came to be in a water tank that's difficult to access. And initially the possibility of foul play was investigated but ruled out. And boy, would I love that information. How did they rule out foul play here when there's several things that just don't seem to fit? LA spokesperson Officer Sarah Faden said the circumstances of Lam's death are highly unusual, and investigators are now trying to determine whether Lam was murdered or if a very, very strange accident occurred. So that's the official word, at least as Snopes had it. Right here, this is just an interesting picture I found on lunaticoutpost.com. They have a whole thread that's been going on with people talking about this case, people adding pictures. I had not seen this picture before, but this is the actual water tank, and that hole is what was cut out by the fire department to actually remove her body. If you see in the reflection, that's the hole that she supposedly went into, and you can see in the reflection there's a little man holding his camera down there. Now, some people have asked about the width of the water tank, because some people are saying, in official reports it says it's only about 4 feet wide. It looks maybe a little wider than that to me, maybe 6 at the most, but I don't think 4 is totally out of spec if you kind of use the person as a reference object and how big. That square is probably, it would have to be more than a foot. But I think at most it's 6 feet wide. But this definitely shows it. There's nothing inside this for someone to stand on. Once you were in this tank, you were all the way in this tank. And when they found her body, the tank was, they say, 1/2 to 3/4 full. So how she closed a metal lid, once again, from the inside. I did see a report that says the metal lid was unsecured. But I also saw another report that said it was closed. I think there might be a latch that just wasn't actually closed on it. So, good picture there. Kind of raises more questions. Now, when I read through the autopsy report, there was some information that really sprung out at me, and I'm really surprised that the news coverage has not mentioned this before, at least in the postings I've seen. Her body was naked, with most of her clothes and personal effects floating in the water near her. It took the LA County Coroner's Office 4 months after repeated delays to release the autopsy report, which reports no evidence of physical trauma, but shows possible ambivalence about its ultimate finding that her cause was accidental. They're referring to that X out that I showed you earlier. So considering that the main story we're supposed to believe is that this was an accidental death, how did she get naked? And how were her clothes found with some type of sand material on them in the tank? It really sounds to me like something happened outside the tank where her clothes were removed, possibly thrown on the roof, which I do believe would have some kind of sand type material on it. Most roofing you look at has some type of pebble like that. And it is noted in the autopsy report that her clothes, that there was a noticeable amount of this sand in her clothes. So in between her going in the elevator, the clothes do match. I did pretty much a piece-by-piece check. The clothes do match what was seen in the elevator, but how did they get removed? And then if you were really, first of all, the thought of suicide is definitely going out the window now, because if you were going to commit suicide, why the hell are you going to bring your clothes in the water tank? A lot of people suggest, why wouldn't you just jump off the roof? Maybe if that was too grisly of a death for you, I can see you possibly going in the water tank, but why would you remove your clothes unless you had planned on coming back out? If you were going in for a dip in the water tank, why did your clothes come in there with you? Really does not make much sense. The autopsy report and its conclusions have also been questioned. For instance, it does not say what the results of the rape and fingernail kits were, or if they were even processed. It also records subcutaneous pooling of blood in Lam's anal area, which some observers suggest was a sign of sexual abuse. At this point, I want to point out, I also found another thread where people had commented there were several registered sex offenders that lived at the Cecil Hotel at that time. Is it possible that she made it up to the roof and ran into a bad situation going on up there, or became the bad situation going on up there with a sex offender who then disposed of her body in the tank? Even Tovar and Wang appeared to be ambivalent about their conclusion that Lam's death was accidental. One page of the report has a form with boxes. I showed that to you. The accident box is dated June 15th. However, 3 days later, the undetermined box was checked instead. There was, at some point in the 3 days before the report's release, noted as an error and crossed out and initialed. Since her death, someone has updated Lam's Tumblr blog, and here is a big question. Her phone was not found. So once again, I think the suicide idea is completely out the window now at this point. Most people that commit suicide, it's not like you're going to lose your phone, or, I mean, you might ditch it somewhere, maybe you throw that off the roof, but phones nowadays are pretty easily traced. I mean, why is there no news story about the follow-up on trying to find her phone? Why is there no information about where did her phone go? If you're saying that there was no one else there, how did her phone disappear? You know, even if she lost it at a bar that night or something like that, it would have come back up in this story. And to date, it hasn't. That phone has not been found. At the very minimum, it sounds like we have a case of theft that should still be followed up on, but LAPD has ruled this as an accidental death due to bipolar disorder, so no muss, no fuss, right? Now, I was doing research, not really research, but last night before I went to sleep, I knew I was going to shoot this today, and there is a show that I like to watch on HULU called The New Detectives. And I saw that they had an episode called Coroner Investigator, and I was really surprised as I started watching this. First of all, if you're interested in seeing how these crime scenes are usually treated, seeing the type of care that the coroner's office does, this is a very good episode. But if you're even more interested, particularly in the Elisa Lam case, Mr. or Dr. Yulai Wang actually appears in this episode. And it just really hit me when I was watching this, and all of a sudden, hey, that name, I know that name. Yeah, I know that name. He's the one that did the autopsy report. He's kind of the supervisor that signed off on that at the end and apparently helped with the autopsy. So I was just doing a search trying to find out a little more about Dr. Yulai Wang, and I searched Yulai Wang New Detectives, which turned up very different results than when I just did Dr. Yulai Wang. If you just do Dr. Yulai Wang, you'll see just what looks like a very generic page for an active doctor and part of the coroner's office. But for some reason, when I did New Detectives as part of the search, it pulled up this file. This is at courthousenews.com, and apparently he is part of a lawsuit where a kind of famous tennis referee, a woman named Mrs. Goodman, her husband Alan Goodman died, and they accused her of murder, but the coroner's office didn't review his body at the scene, which is kind of weird because that episode of New Detectives that I saw states that they usually investigate all of that, but they decided not to because of his age. And later, when Dr. Wang performed the autopsy, he said that the cuts that were found on this man's head didn't seem to match the story, and they prosecuted her like she was a suspect, and LAPD detectives went on television to talk about it. They really ran her through the ringer, and then 4 months after all that, DA drops all charges against her. Well, now she's coming back and she's suing all of them. So Dr. Wang does have a little smudge, it looks like, on his professional career here in terms of maybe not getting it right. This article, their comment that they wrote in the initial statement, pretty much accuses him of not being very good at his job. So just another little wrinkle in this whole story about Elisa. So, oh man, I don't know. I always feel weird when I do this story. I just, I wanted to shoot it last week, but I knew I'd have to look at all these details again, and it just leaves me with this kind of sad feeling at the end of it all. The sadness is coming from the fact that it's like this is being brushed under the rug. It's like people are not doing the right thing here. And we already have so many stories going on right now with police departments that are being busted for, shooting when it's inappropriate, abusive situations that are now starting to be found out. And in a case like this, when someone was potentially murdered, shouldn't they at least release a statement clarifying why they were able to say, our detectives have determined that it was not a murder, that there was no foul play? Shouldn't there be some semblance of a story that makes sense? In that episode of The New Detectives that I watched, that's one of the things that the main coroner investigator that they were following, that was one of the things that she talked about as part of her job, was that she needed to understand the story of the death. And she even goes into suicides and how how usually it's people with very simple problems that she just wishes they wouldn't do that. But the story of this death is definitely not understood. And now you have a key piece of evidence, her cell phone, that is just floating out in this world somewhere. Why wasn't that followed up? Why didn't they try tracing cell towers, seeing if it was still active? Is anyone using it? Maybe they did. Maybe they found something they didn't want to find. I have no idea. But the press definitely does not have this story complete. And it seems like the police department have done everything they can to just get to an endpoint in the investigation where they could just point back to this autopsy report as a very simple explanation. They won't call it a suicide, but they're calling it an accidental death. Well, that's one hell of an accident when you have to climb a staircase to a rooftop, take off your clothes, rub them in the ground, then throw them into the water tank before you dive in it yourself, stay up there, close the top, and wait for the end to come. Just talk about a story that doesn't hold water. I don't get it. I really don't get it. Once again, my heart goes out to Elisa's family and her sister Sarah, which her name popped up on the autopsy report, and I believe that she was with the parents standing in the background of that footage. Those are pretty hard expressions on those people's faces, and that's before they found out that the body was actually found in the water tower. I'm sure this has been tough on all of them, but I hope that they do everything within their power to keep pressing on this too and making people do the right thing, because it sure seems like the right thing has not happened in this case. As a matter of fact, I hope that at some point this new Hollywood Sony movie about this case helps shake up this information again, so the public continues to ask these questions, people like you and me, and maybe someday the truth will come out about this situation. Until then, I'll be here taking a look at it. Please feel free to shoot me any more info you find in the comments below. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down on this video. And thank you for your time. Take care of yourselves.